Hi, I'm Venora. And 2 nights ago, at my sister's engagement dinner, she called me a poor trash worker in front of the whole table. But the thing is, they were sitting in a restaurant I built. They didn't know it. Not yet. Worse than her insult was how normal it felt, like being erased was just part of the evening's menu. No one defended me, not my parents, not even my brother. Then a guest looked around and asked, "What's the owner doing eating with the guests?" And suddenly, everything cracked open. Have you ever been invisible in a room you built with your own hands? The message came through just after 3 p.m. I was prepping a new menu item in the test kitchen when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was from my mother, Clorinda. A rare enough occurrence to make my pulse flicker. The text was brief, coldly efficient. Engagement dinner for Isolde and Alden, Thursday at 7, Maison Verde. No hello, no signature, and of course, no mention that Maison Verde was mine. They didn't know, of course. How would they? I hadn't exactly shouted it from the rooftops. After all, this was the family who once told me that sanitation work wasn't real entrepreneurship. The irony that they'd chosen my flagship restaurant, thinking it simply chic enough for Isolde's image, landed heavy. I wiped my hands on a clean towel and stared at the screen, letting the absurdity settle. I debated not going. A part of me, the part still trying to grow thick skin, told me to protect my peace. But another part, the quieter one, the girl they once tried to erase, whispered, "Show up, let them sit in the space you built." So I replied, "I'll be there." On Thursday evening, I arrived 10 minutes early. Nashville was unusually warm for spring, the light still soft as I stepped from my rideshare onto the sidewalk. I wore a slate gray wrap dress, understated but tailored, and kept my hair up, a look that never seemed expensive enough for Clorinda, but made me feel grounded. The signage outside Maison Verde gleamed subtly, catching the last bit of sunlight. I took a breath and walked in through the front entrance for the first time in months. Marcus, our floor manager, was near the host stand. His eyes widened a fraction. Normally, I came in through the back kitchen or after-hours meetings, not as a guest. He nodded discreetly, saying nothing. "Hope the Eco Queen remembered deodorant," read the caption on the Instagram story I pulled up as I waited. Isolde had posted it that afternoon, overlaid on a filtered image of a dumpster with a tiara emoji. My name wasn't tagged, but the timing and tone were clear enough. She'd always preferred cruelty with a smile. A young server, new, I realized, approached me. "Ma'am, would you mind helping with the spill near table 6? He asked, gesturing to a small puddle near the back. I blinked, then smiled gently. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." "Oh," he stammered, reddening as Marcus swiftly intervened. "She's with the Mitchell party," Marcus said with calm precision. The server apologized under his breath and scurried off. I let it go. Tonight wasn't about correcting every assumption. It was about observing, and perhaps, just maybe, reclaiming something. The family was already seated. Of course, at the center table, beneath the large, reclaimed wood chandelier I'd sourced myself. Clorinda wore pale pink silk and an expression that said she was tolerating the moment. Wendell, my father, was scrolling on his phone. Isolde, ever poised, was draped in ivory with pearls at her neck, her arm looped through Alden's. The man looked like he'd stepped out of a LinkedIn profile picture. Sharp suit, firm handshake, zero soul. I approached slowly. Clorinda air-kissed my cheek, her fragrance of gardenia overbearing. "Venora," she said, her tone like someone acknowledging a server. "You're early." "On time, actually," I replied softly, glancing at the clock. Isolde offered her cheek without rising. "You look comfortable," she said, eyes skimming my dress. Alden gave me a firm nod, his smile polite but vacant. "Nice to meet you," he said, as if we hadn't crossed paths briefly at a business panel 2 years ago. I hadn't introduced myself then. He hadn't remembered me now. Champagne was poured. The conversation spun quickly toward wedding plans, guest lists, venue logistics, honeymoon debates. I sipped quietly, mostly ignored, occasionally offered a crumb of inclusion. When I mentioned a new sustainability grant program, Clorinda blinked and said, "That sounds pleasant." Dinner service began. Our staff moved with the efficiency I'd trained into them. I noticed the details, the temperature of the plates, the garnish precision, the way the light pooled around the centerpiece without glaring into diners' eyes. Every element whispered intention. None of it registered with my family. Clorinda turned to me during the first course. "That dress," she said with a tilt of her head, "is very practical. Just like your work, I imagine." I smiled tightly. "It serves." Wendell cleared his throat. He lifted his glass. "To Alden," he declared, voice resonant. "To the man who will elevate this family's name, its vision, our future." There was a chorus of glass clinks. Isolde beamed. Clorinda nodded with approval. No one looked at me. I raised my flute anyway, the bubbles catching the low light. Inside, something shifted. They were toasting a man who didn't know where he was sitting. In a room I'd built, with cutlery I'd selected, dining on a menu I'd designed. And yet, I wasn't even part of the toast. I don't know what I expected when I came back to that table. Gratitude, maybe. Or at the very least, acknowledgement. But what I got was more of the same, wrapped in fine linens and polite smiles. The clinking of silverware against porcelain masked the sharper edges of our conversations, but I could hear every slice. Wendell leaned over, speaking to Alden, with that fatherly tone he reserved for men he deemed worthy. "This wedding will open doors, son. Connections like the Hastings and Gelmans don't come easy, but they'll come through for you now." Clorinda, ever the social cartographer, chimed in proudly, listing who sat where, who they'd seated near whom. I wasn't mentioned. I glanced around the table. Every person had been asked about their work, their recent trips, their children. Me? Nothing. I might as well have been a decorative fern. When the appetizers arrived, Clorinda turned to me with that rehearsed smile she'd worn at every gala, fundraiser, and photo shoot since I was a teenager. Still doing that thing with, what is it, public sanitation? The word came out like she'd just stepped in something unpleasant. I didn't blink. "Still doing that thing," I answered. "Only now, there's a waiting list to learn how." She chuckled, dismissing the tension as if I were just being cheeky. "Well, everyone needs a purpose," she said, "even if it's a little unorthodox." I caught Alden watching the exchange, his expression unreadable. Maybe he'd never seen someone politely gutted at a dinner table before. Wendell stood, raising his glass. "To Alden," he declared, his voice smooth and practiced. "To the man who will elevate this family, whose drive, vision, and integrity will lead us into the future." The table erupted in applause. Isolde beamed, her ring catching the candlelight just so. Clorinda's eyes welled. Whether from pride or Chardonnay, I couldn't tell. I lifted my glass too, but not for him. As I sipped, a thought clawed its way to the surface. I built the very chair you're sitting on, and yet I'm the one no one sees. A few minutes later, a distant cousin, I think her name was Mallory, asked, "So, Venora, what exactly do you do?" A simple question. Too simple. Before I could open my mouth, Isolde interjected with a flick of her hand. "She does something with eco-trash startups, I think. It's like a compost thing, but for commercial spaces." Nervous laughter trickled around the table like someone had spilled a glass of something sticky. Alden added with a smirk, "Hey, at least you're doing your part for the environment." Clorinda said nothing, just adjusted her napkin like it had offended her. I sat there, smiling like it didn't sting. Like I hadn't spent the last 7 years building a business from nothing. Like I wasn't the reason they could sit in that restaurant without a wait list or an entry vetting call. Like I was disposable. My silence grew teeth. I excused myself under the guise of needing the restroom. My heels clicked steadily against the polished concrete floors as I walked toward the back hallway. I passed the kitchen window, where the team plated with focus, where steam rose like ritual, where my fingerprints lived on every surface, though no one in that dining room knew it. In the bathroom, I stared into the mirror. My lipstick had faded, my shoulders had dipped slightly forward. I straightened, tucked a loose strand of hair back, looked myself in the eye. CEO, I whispered. Founder, owner. 3 words, not decorations, not defenses, just facts. I lingered long enough to let the weight of them settle again, not because I doubted, but because I needed to remember that I hadn't climbed this far to shrink under their shallow gazes. When I returned, nothing had changed at the table. The conversation had moved on to travel plans and registry gifts, but I wasn't the same. I slid into my chair, adjusted my napkin, and folded my hands in my lap. My smile remained, but the silence inside had transformed. It wasn't fear anymore, it was preparation. The dinner dragged on like a boardroom meeting without an agenda. Just faces around a polished table, pretending there was purpose in repetition. Every subject revolved around Isolde and Alden. The dress, the venue, whether the signature cocktail should be cucumber mint or something less predictable. Isolde's voice laced each update with exaggerated poise, never missing a chance to redirect any shifting attention back to herself. She even interrupted Alden mid-sentence to mention how well-connected her stylist was. Alden, to his credit, played along like a pro. He tossed in phrases like brand synergy and strategic alliances, trying too hard to sound important in a room that had already labeled him so. I sat still, listening to the performance. My fork moved absently, pushing roasted beet slices across the plate. I wondered how many dinners I'd been to like this. Different walls, different faces, same script. Everyone waiting for the right moment to say the thing that gets them invited to the next one. Clorinda reached for her water glass and turned to me, a too-practiced smile forming. "By the way, I used that tote you gave me," she said, as if that somehow tied me to the rest of their conversation. I looked up. "It's very practical," she continued, "held up fine with the cleaning supplies. I tossed in a few scrub bottles, gloves. It's a good utility bag." My throat tightened, but I didn't flinch. That tote was printed with the motto I had chosen after 2 years of building clean living. It's not waste, it's the future. Isolde caught my expression and smirked, eyes glinting over her wine. She didn't say anything, but she didn't have to. Her silence was seasoned, cruelty wrapped in quiet. The bag had been a gift for Mother's Day. A gesture, not just of utility, but identity. My way of saying, I'm not who you thought I'd be, but I'm proud of who I am. And just like that, Clorinda had reduced it to a cleaning caddy. Before I could respond, Elena appeared beside me with a pitcher of sparkling water. She moved with a quiet grace, her hair pulled back in a simple twist, eyes sharper than most noticed. She leaned closer than she had to anyone else that night, speaking just loud enough for me to hear. "I still use the leadership notes you printed for me." Then she poured gently, not waiting for acknowledgement. "Elena, one of the first women I hired after opening the second clean living location. She'd been out of work for a year, raising 2 kids on her own. I'd seen something in her, the ability to lead with warmth but command with calm, and she had delivered. That whisper from her wasn't just gratitude, it was reminder, proof. As she walked away, I straightened my shoulders. A man across the table, someone Isolde introduced earlier as a friend from Dartmouth, looked in my direction. "Venora, right? What do you do again?" My mouth opened, but Isolde beat me to it. "She runs some kind of non-profit recycling thing," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's like a community startup or something, definitely not corporate, but cute." A few chuckles drifted up like smoke from a dying fire. Alden leaned back, arms crossed, eyes scanning his wineglass. I let the quiet sit. Let them assume my silence was agreement, not strategy. She called it cute. The business that saved entire buildings from mold infestation, that helped schools lower waste costs by 40%, that brought clean jobs to single parents like Elena. Cute. It wasn't the lie that stung. It was the erasure, the rewriting of me in real time to suit the comfort of their narrative. I reached for my phone, placing it face down on the linen tablecloth. My thumb pressed against the side, activating the screen. A notification hovered. My TEDx video had crossed 200,000 views. I excused myself, claiming a call. No one questioned it. Outside, the air had cooled, the breeze carrying the scent of rosemary and citrus from the rooftop garden we maintained for seasonal herbs. I walked to the far edge of the patio, past the soft lighting and the faint clinking of glasses from other diners. There was a stone bench under a small olive tree. I sat, thumb hovering over the video. For a second, I considered deleting it. The voice in my head, the old one, still echoing from teenage dinners and parent-teacher conferences, told me I was being too proud, that I should just let it go. But another voice, steadier now, louder with each passing year, said something else. They can call me whatever they want, mislabel it, laugh at it, minimize it. I tapped the video once, watched my own face appear. The talk had been impromptu 3 years ago after a cancellation. I'd spoken about dignity in overlooked work, how we measure worth by title, not impact, how some of the dirtiest jobs left the cleanest footprints. I watched for exactly 90 seconds. Then I locked the phone. They will speak my name before the night is done, I whispered. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with truth. When I returned to the table, the air had shifted. It was subtle, like the way a room changes when someone's left and no one mentions it. My chair gave a faint squeak as I slid back into place. The sound was barely audible, but it drew everyone's eyes. I held Isolde's gaze longer than I should have. She blinked first. The plates had been cleared. Next came the main course, a seared halibut resting on a bed of herbed lentils, topped with an onion reduction glaze. The kind of dish that took 6 weeks of testing in my kitchen. The kind of detail no one here thought I'd be capable of approving, much less creating. Isolde's fork hovered, her nose wrinkled. I thought I said no onions, she said, voice sharp enough to draw glances from the next table. Alden leaned closer to her. Is this a problem? They used a fermented glaze, I said, calm but unflinching. No raw ingredients, infused for 48 hours. But if it's a concern, we'll prepare something else. The waiter, Jessica, froze for a moment, looking to me. I nodded once. Isolde was already flustered. It's fine, she said quickly, pushing the plate an inch forward. I'll manage. Alden, always the opportunist, tried to lighten the mood. Just shows you how hands-on she still is, huh? He said, gesturing toward me with a laugh. Isolde forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Clorinda adjusted her bracelet again, the third time in 10 minutes. Still running that little operation of yours? Isolde asked as she dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin. Or did you finally decide sanitation wasn't your path? The jab was expected, but something about the word sanitation stuck this time. How she said it, like it had dirt under its fingernails. I kept my tone even. We're not just running, we're expanding. 3 new partnerships this quarter, one with the city council, another with a regional medical network. Isolde tilted her head. Well, look at you. Clorinda cut in with a soft chuckle. It's good to stay busy, dear. I didn't answer. Let the stillness settle instead. Just then, a man from another table stood and approached ours. Late 40s, navy suit, wedding ring worn to the bone. His presence was confident, but not intrusive. Excuse me, he said, addressing the group. I just wanted to compliment the staff. The attention to detail, the scent in the air, the way the lighting flatters the space. It's all incredibly thoughtful. You don't get that everywhere. He turned to me. This feels like your vibe. Are you part of the concept here? Before anyone could interrupt, I smiled. You could say that. He nodded appreciatively. Well, whoever's behind it, kudos. It's intentional, respectful. As he walked away, Alden gave a low whistle. You get that a lot? Not often enough, I said. The conversation slowed after that. Even Isolde lost her momentum. Clorinda busied herself with her wine, her fingers turning the stem of her glass like she was winding time backward. Wendell was absorbed in his phone, probably checking market alerts or rereading his own company's press release from a decade ago. I leaned back, taking in the scene. The chandelier above us, repurposed wood beams I'd sourced from a Tennessee barn sale. The music, custom curated by my team to mirror each course's pace. The floor plan, redesigned twice to balance acoustics with intimacy, and not one of them saw it. Not really. They'd walked into my space believing it was just another backdrop for their curated evening. Just a restaurant. Just another luxury venue to stamp Isolde's image on. But every detail screamed me, my decisions, my sweat, my vision. If they won't hear the warning, I thought, my fingers brushing the edge of my plate, they'll feel the shift. I didn't say it aloud, not yet. But the table had already started to listen, whether they knew it or not. There's a particular silence that falls when tension climbs just high enough for everyone to feel it, but not name it. That's the space we all sat in as dessert loomed, but no one reached for the menu. I noticed the way guests started to speak more carefully, how Clorinda leaned forward, trying to regain control of the atmosphere, like a conductor salvaging an off-key orchestra. She laughed a little too brightly. I've already spoken to the florist. You'll want someone discreet, Isolde. Not everyone survives their first try at weddings. Her eyes flicked to me, just long enough to confirm the target. The temperature shifted, just slightly. Even Isolde paused with her spoon halfway to her lips. I placed my glass down carefully, letting the stem touch the linen before answering. Sometimes surviving the wrong choice is the real win. A small gasp came from someone, maybe Mallory. Isolde gave an awkward chuckle and shifted in her seat. Alden looked around as though hoping someone else would change the subject for him. Clorinda blinked, her smile tight. Well, she said, reaching for her water, no one's perfect. Alden turned to Isolde with the kind of charm that feels too polished. This place really is perfect for tonight. Classy, upscale, but still grounded, you know? Exactly, Isolde beamed. It's sustainable without feeling like a school cafeteria. Elegant, but with heart. They spent a year sourcing biodegradable slateware, I offered, letting the words hang. Isolde nodded. That's what you get when professionals are in charge. Alden clinked his fork against his plate and chuckled. Crazy how far you've come from hauling trash, huh? I didn't blink, didn't wince, just stared straight at him. Yeah, Isolde added, lips curling at the corners. At least she's not sorting bins anymore. There it was. My smile was steady as I set down my fork. You're right, I said. I no longer sort. I own the system now. Clorinda coughed into her napkin. Alden's grin faltered. Isolde's eyes widened for a heartbeat before she caught herself and leaned back like nothing had shifted. But everything had. People like to imagine success comes in straight lines, I said, not raising my voice. That the titles are what matter, but sometimes it's the hands that got dirty that built the foundation you're all standing on. I looked around the table, faces frozen, pretending to be unfazed. This restaurant, the materials, the air quality system, the chef who trained the staff you're praising, those weren't choices made by a committee. They were mine. No one moved. Maybe next time you wonder who signs the checks for places like this, I added, my voice low and clear. Remember, it might be the person you least expect. Clorinda's hand, mid-reach for her wineglass, stopped in the air. The silence after my last sentence wasn't passive. It was stifling. Clorinda's hand, frozen mid-reach for her glass, trembled ever so slightly before retreating to her lap. I didn't expect a response. Honestly, I preferred the quiet. It left them with their own thoughts, the ones they never let surface. Alden attempted to laugh, the sound coming out too sharp. "Well, I think this place has great energy," he said, lifting his glass as if that would somehow reset the table. Isolde leaned toward Clorinda, whispering something too soft to catch, but her posture had stiffened. Gone was the easy slouch of the golden child. She sat upright now, her shoulders rigid, eyes tracking every move I made. Jessica, our lead server, returned to clear plates. When she took mine, she met my gaze and gave a subtle nod. Respectful, silent. We both knew exactly what was unfolding here. Clorinda cleared her throat and tried again. "The decor is truly stunning," she said. "It's refined without being sterile. Whoever designed this space should be very proud." "They should," I replied evenly. Wendell, who had been largely absent in the background of the evening, suddenly looked up from his phone. "I'd like to meet the owner," he said. "Give them our compliments. It's rare to find a place that strikes this kind of balance." Isolde perked up. "Yes, we should thank them personally. A handwritten note, maybe. Make sure we're invited back." I tilted my head slightly. "They know," I said. "You've been thanking them all night." It took a beat for the words to sink in. Clorinda's smile faltered like a candle flickering before it dies. Her eyes narrowed slightly, trying to process. No, trying to resist processing. Wendell blinked, confused. Jessica returned with wine for the final course, placing the glass in front of me first. "Ms. Venora, your reserve," she said gently. Alden's gaze snapped to her. "Ms. Venora," he echoed. "Of course," Jessica said brightly, unaware, or perfectly aware, of the storm that was now gathering under the surface. Alden squinted at me. "You're the—" He didn't finish. "I thought I'd reached out to your team a few years ago," he muttered. "About clean living? Was trying to pitch an investment strategy. Never heard back." "You did," I said simply. "Oh," he said, voice barely audible. "So that was—" Another pause. Just then, the doors near the bar opened, and Leona walked in. Every time I saw her, she looked like she belonged at a head table, power and pearl earrings. She wore a navy wrap coat, silk scarf at her throat, and the kind of confidence that doesn't ask permission to enter. She walked straight to our table, stopping at my side. "I heard you were dining tonight," she said, her voice cutting through the awkward tension like a violin in a room full of broken chords. She placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "I owe so much to this woman." Isolde blinked. Clorinda tilted her head, her throat tightening. "Leona." I rose slightly, enough to acknowledge, but not overperform. "Glad you made it." "You've outdone yourself," she said, gesturing to the room. Then to the table. "And if this is your family, they should be very proud." No one said a word. The investors at the neighboring table, who had overheard pieces of this unraveling, looked over curiously. Jessica came back again, this time with the dessert menu. She handed one to me first. As the plates clinked and chairs shifted, I sat back and looked at each of them. Wendell staring at his hands. Clorinda, lips pressed into a line. Isolde, flushed and too still. Alden, now deeply engrossed in the empty stem of his glass. None of them looked at me with pity anymore. They looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time. And maybe they were. They had been sitting in my shadow all along. For a moment, no one moved. Clorinda's hand still hovered over her wineglass, as if unsure whether to finish her sip or simply disappear behind the stem. The hum of conversation that once danced lightly between courses had vanished. All that remained was the soft, pulsing tension of everyone trying to act like they hadn't just watched their carefully curated evening fall out of sync. Alden cleared his throat in the way men do when they want to reset a room, but have no idea how. Isolde kept her gaze locked on her water glass, her fingers tracing the rim like it held answers. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The words I'd offered moments ago were still circling them, unanswered, unchallenged, just present. And for once, their silence said more than their scripts ever could. Then, from the table to our right, a woman in a deep green silk blouse stood. She was maybe in her 50s, composed in a way that made others sit straighter when she moved. She approached Marcus near the host stand and spoke just loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Excuse me," she said with a smile, nodding toward our table. "What's the owner doing dining with guests tonight?" Every fork paused mid-air. Wendell looked up, blinking. Isolde visibly stiffened. Marcus didn't flinch. "Ms. Venora requested to dine discreetly this evening," he answered calmly, then glanced toward me with a knowing tilt of his head. The woman followed his gaze and offered me a subtle nod. "Smart of her," she said, before returning to her seat without another word. Clorinda leaned toward Isolde. "What's happening?" she whispered. Isolde said nothing. Then came the moment I hadn't planned, hadn't orchestrated, but welcomed all the same. "Wait," said Mallory's son, Eli, I think, the tech-savvy cousin who hadn't looked up from his phone most of the evening. "I've seen you before, that TED Talk, about dignity in labor." He tapped something on his screen, and moments later, the wall-mounted monitor above the dessert station lit up. I watched my own face appear, calm, focused, lit by stage lights I'd almost forgotten. The room fell completely silent. In the video, I spoke about invisible labor, about how sanitation, hospitality, and care work were the scaffolding of society, not the scraps. I told stories, some mine, some borrowed with permission, of women like Elena, who rebuilt their lives from behind mop buckets and checklists. The video ended. And then, the impossible happened. A slow clap from the far left table. Then another. And another. Soon, a soft chorus of applause moved through the room. Not thunderous, not performative, but honest. The kind of clapping that comes when people know they've missed something important and are trying, awkwardly, to catch up. Leona had slid into the empty chair next to me somewhere during all this. She leaned over and whispered, "You didn't even have to raise your voice." I kept my eyes on Isolde, who was now rigid in her chair, cheeks flushed with something she couldn't mask with posture or powder. "You've been hiding this?" she asked quietly, voice almost cracking. I didn't blink. "No," I said. "You've just been refusing to see it." Clorinda cleared her throat again, but this time she said nothing. Her hands stayed in her lap. Wendell pushed back slightly from the table, face unreadable. I took a sip of my water. Not wine, not tonight. I wanted clarity. "I didn't come here to prove anything," I said aloud, more to the room than to them. "I just stopped apologizing for succeeding in a way you didn't recognize." No one reached for a rebuttal. They knew. The applause faded. The room quieted again. But it wasn't their restaurant anymore. It was mine. Always was. Clorinda was the first to break the silence. Her voice didn't rise, but it cut through the air like a wire pulled taut. "Is this your place? All of this?" Her eyes scanned the walls, the staff, even the plates, as if she'd only just realized she'd been sitting inside something unfamiliar, wearing the costume of comfort. I met her gaze without flinching. Yes, it always was. No one spoke. The quiet wasn't hollow anymore. It was sharp, like glass, waiting for someone to press too hard and crack it. Even the soft clinking of plates from across the dining room seemed muted. The light from the chandelier warmed the table, but no one reached for their drinks. I rose, not dramatically, but with purpose. Every pair of eyes followed me. "You asked if this was mine," I said, not to Clorinda specifically, but to the whole table. "And yes, it is. But not because I needed a title or a spotlight. I built this out of nights no one saw. When I left the bakery at 3 a.m., hands raw and back aching, and went straight to a prep kitchen just to learn how to survive in a world that didn't make space for women like me." Isolde looked away. I kept going. This wasn't charity. This wasn't someone handing me a second chance. This was scraped together with rent overdue and bank cards maxed out and more burned risatos than I care to admit. Wendell blinked like he was trying to interrupt, but I didn't give him the window. I didn't want to be impressive. I just wanted to be respected. There was a pause long enough for everyone to shift uncomfortably. I watched Alden fidget with his napkin. Isolde's hand was clenched in her lap. The screen behind the bar, usually reserved for sports or ambient visuals, flared to life again. The TEDx clip resumed from where it had paused earlier. It wasn't a cue I gave, but it felt like the room needed the reminder. My recorded voice filled the space. The world doesn't need more CEOs in glass towers. It needs more people willing to clean it, outside and in. Applause began again, hesitant at first, then steady. A couple at the neighboring table stood and clapped slowly. A man from across the room gave a thumbs up. Even Marcus, who rarely broke form, nodded from near the kitchen door. My family didn't move. Clorinda's expression was unreadable, like she was rearranging every assumption she'd ever had, and none of the pieces fit anymore. Isolde's voice cracked as she finally spoke. So you just sat here, through this whole night, waiting to make us feel small? I turned to her. No, I sat here hoping, maybe just once, you'd see me. But you didn't. And now it doesn't matter. She blinked rapidly, jaw clenched. I stepped back from the table. Leona had already risen and stood nearby, ready but not rushing me. There was nothing left to rush. I gathered my purse. Not in a hurry, not storming off. Just done. I'll see you at the next meeting, Ms. Venora, Leona said softly as she reached for my elbow. I looked back one last time, not for approval, not for apology. Just acknowledgement. Even now, none came. This time, I said quietly, I'll send the check. The lights had dimmed. Most of the plates were gone, the music barely a whisper now. Guests had trickled out quietly, leaving behind wine-streaked glasses and untouched desserts. I sat alone at the table, where my family once huddled like royalty, now just empty chairs and folded napkins. I swirled the last of my wine and watched the ripples form small circles before disappearing. The echo of voices drifted in from the hallway. Clorinda and Wendell, their murmured argument muted by distance, but sharp enough to carry the tone. Even now, they argued without saying it, without saying me. They still won't say my name out loud, I whispered. The staff was moving through cleanup quietly, like stagehands resetting a theater, after the show had already changed the audience. The clatter of cutlery had rhythm now, one that didn't ask for approval or attention. Isolde had left without a word. No eye contact, no final jab. She simply stood, clutched her handbag like a lifeline, and walked out. Alden followed, expression unreadable, not even glancing in my direction. Leona sat across from me for a moment, her posture as steady as her presence. She leaned in just enough to speak low. Now comes the part they won't show up for, she said. The silence. I nodded once, grateful for her clarity. She squeezed my hand gently before standing to leave. You did more than speak tonight, she added. You changed the story. Clorinda passed me not long after, eyes carefully focused somewhere beyond me. She walked slowly, chin tilted upward, arms crossed like she was bracing for a breeze that never came. Not a glance. Not a word. Just exit. I let her go. A few minutes later, Elena appeared. She wore her apron loose now, a bit of hair escaping her bun. She began clearing our table, moving with the same quiet confidence I remembered when I first hired her. She paused, glanced at me, then reached into her apron pocket and slipped a folded napkin onto the table. I looked down. In pen, in her neat handwriting, were 5 words. We knew before they did. I folded it, slipped it into my clutch. Didn't say a word, didn't need to. I stayed seated a while longer, not to bask in anything, but to breathe. I replayed the night, not the jabs or insults, but the shifts. The moment Alden realized he'd pitched to me, and not the man behind me. the flicker in Isolde's eyes when the applause wasn't for her, Clorinda's blink when Leona used my name without hesitation. There was no joy in the memory, no surge of triumph. I didn't want to beat them, I whispered. I wanted them to understand. But sometimes understanding costs too much. And maybe they weren't ready to pay. I stood slowly, walked the restaurant like a guest, not an owner, ran my hand along the wood of the hostess stand I'd designed, paused at the custom lighting fixture that hung above the center table, the one I'd fought so hard to get made locally. These were not declarations. These were choices. Years of them. I made my way to the back of the house, where the staff was finishing up. I nodded to Marcus, who nodded back without saying anything, but with everything in his eyes. I returned to the dining area, now dim and silent, and looked at the space one last time that evening. Tomorrow, we prep for lunch at 11. I said it aloud, not to anyone else, but to myself. 2 days had passed, and the silence was louder than any dinner toast. My phone didn't buzz that morning. No text from Clorinda, no voicemail from Wendell, no guilt-laced apology from Isolde. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that says everything. I sat at the kitchen counter of my apartment, coffee growing cold in my hand. The clip from that night, my TEDx talk, the one the world had forgotten until it wasn't convenient to ignore, was circulating. Someone had uploaded it to a local community platform, titled it, "She Cleaned Up More Than Just Trash." I wasn't tagged, but it didn't matter. People knew. I watched the view count climb as I sat barefoot in my robe, unsure if I felt vindicated or simply emptied out. Sometimes when a dam breaks, it doesn't flood. It just drains. Later that afternoon, a friend forwarded me a link. Isolde's name was trending on a Nashville social account. A whispered post claimed that her fiancé's firm had backed out of a strategic investment deal with another sustainability group, citing conflicts of interest. The caption was brutal. From wedding bells to business hells? That same morning, Alden sent a text. No greeting, no context. "I never meant to offend you. It was a misunderstanding." I didn't respond. What was there to clarify? He'd known exactly what he was doing when he laughed, when he joined in. Misunderstandings don't come in the form of humiliation. By noon, I noticed Isolde had unfollowed me on every social media platform. I clicked, stared for a beat, then closed the app. The tote bag I had once handed Clorinda, dismissed as practical for cleaning supplies, had somehow made its way into a newspaper feature. A journalist had found the quote printed on it and built a piece around it, calling it the mission statement of an overlooked movement. It's not waste, it's the future. The piece didn't mention the dinner, but it didn't need to. A young designer in Atlanta had already mocked up shirts and digital posters, quoting the line beneath abstract sketches of women in aprons and lab coats. For once, they weren't invisible. Clorinda called around 4:30. I recognized the number immediately, let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "Venora," she began, the voice clipped but calm. "You embarrassed us, but you did well." I leaned back in my chair. "You don't have to be proud of me, Mother," I said. "Just stop pretending I never existed." There was a pause, just a breath. Then the call ended. No goodbye, no pause to let the silence settle. Just gone. I stood up, pulled on my blazer, and headed to the office. By early evening, Leona had emailed. Clean living was being featured in an upcoming Women of Reinvention issue. The headline was short and sharp, "From Trash to Triumph." She ended the message with a single line. "This is only the beginning." I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for 2 days. No one clapped, no camera flashed. But inside, a small voice I hadn't heard since childhood whispered something real. "You've already lived past them." 3 days had passed since the dinner. The air in my office felt different now, more mine than ever. Not because anything monumental had shifted overnight, but because I had. The lobby was quiet. The staff moved with calm efficiency, and every nod or soft smile from them reminded me I didn't need applause to know I belonged here. As I stepped into my office at Clean Living HQ that morning, a few heads looked up. A couple of morning Ms. Venora greetings reached my ears. Not overly formal, just sincere. There was no grand acknowledgement of what had unfolded, and that was perfect. I spent the first hour reviewing media requests, brand partnership proposals, and 3 local schools requesting mentorship collaborations. The Women of Reinvention feature was already being formatted for layout. A photo of me in the greenhouse, sleeves rolled up, watering basil. Quiet, authentic. That was the version of myself I had longed for someone to see years ago. Now the world was beginning to catch up. Around noon, Ethan showed up unannounced. He looked uncomfortable in his business casual khakis, holding a coffee he clearly bought just to have something in his hands. "Got a minute?" he asked, hovering by the doorway. I nodded. "Sure." We sat at the small table in the corner of my office, not the big desk, the one that tends to intimidate visitors. Ethan leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees like he did when we were kids, and he'd stolen the last cookie, but didn't want to confess. "I didn't get it," he started. "Not when you dropped out. Not when you said no to Dad's offer. I thought you were just being difficult." I didn't interrupt. He looked at me, eyes steadier than I remembered. "But I watched you the other night. You weren't performing. You were just solid. Like you'd been that person all along, and I was the one who never saw it." I breathed in slowly. "Why now, Ethan?" He gave a weak smile. "Because I was scared to choose wrong. You weren't. That deserves respect." We didn't hug, we didn't cry. But in that moment, something unspoken softened between us. Not everything can be repaired, but it can be acknowledged. That afternoon, Clorinda invited me to brunch. A message, not a call. "Neutral ground," it said. The phrase almost made me laugh. Still, I went. We met at a quiet bistro in East Nashville, the kind with reclaimed wood tables and artisanal tea that looked more like soup. She wore pearls and a crisp blouse, like she wanted to project elegance without effort. I wore jeans and a blazer. We both knew what this was. She didn't ease into it. "You embarrassed us," she said over her chai. "But you did it with elegance." I folded my napkin in half. I stopped needing your praise the day I started building without it. She blinked but didn't flinch. There was something almost respectful in her silence. We sat like that for a minute. 2 women who had once tried to shape each other into something tolerable. Now we simply coexisted, like 2 statues facing different directions in the same garden. "I was proud of you once," she said finally, "when you won that writing award in 7th grade. I met her eyes. You're allowed to be proud again, but not if it means rewriting the past." She nodded slowly. "That's fair." I pushed my cup away. "You're my mother, but that doesn't give you the right to narrate my life." Clorinda opened her mouth, then closed it again. No apology came, just a small, almost reluctant nod. Outside, the sun was finally pushing past the clouds. We stood, neither of us reaching to hug. As I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel broken either. I just felt like myself. The door's not locked, but they'll knock next time. The scent of basil greeted me first, clean and fresh, like the promise of a new beginning. The greenhouse above the Clean Living test kitchen pulsed with life. Morning light sifted through the skylights, casting soft green shadows on the walkway. My fingertips brushed across leaves as I walked slowly between rows of herbs. Mint, oregano, thyme. All thriving. All cared for. Below, I could hear the muffled clatter of prep. Laughter bubbled up occasionally. Someone teasing someone else. Someone singing off-key. The hum of a kitchen before service always carried a current, but today it wasn't anxious. It was steady. I didn't need to direct anymore. I just needed to be present. In the adjacent event space, we'd arranged a long handmade wooden table for our monthly mentorship brunch. The women seated there were varied in age and background, some still in community college, others already working part-time jobs while caring for siblings or their own children. Each of them held notebooks, not phones. Their attention wasn't performative, it was hungry. One of the younger girls, maybe 19, raised her hand shyly during our Q&A. "Did you always know you'd end up here?" I smiled and shook my head. "Not at all, but I always knew where I didn't want to stay." That earned a few nods, a few smiles of shared understanding. I told them about my early days, scrubbing floors with cracked hands, counting coins to pay for night classes, applying for grants under a pseudonym because my family name opened doors I didn't want favors from. I told them about failing, and not the polished kind of failure people love to romanticize. Real failure, gutting, silent failure, and how I built anyway. Toward the end of our session, someone from the team rushed in quietly and handed me an iPad. "It just went live," she whispered. On the screen, an international sustainability campaign banner from the UN, with a bold headline, "Not waste, future." And just below, a photo of the tote bag we'd once printed for a community cleanup, now the campaign's center visual. Leona had already texted, "Told you, you're a global ambassador now." I laughed quietly, tapping back a single thumbs-up emoji. That was enough. Later that day, as the kitchen staff began prepping for the evening, I stepped into my office and paused at the small corkboard by my desk. There, already pinned among sticky notes and to-do lists, was a florist receipt. I'd sent flowers to Isolde's wedding, not out of obligation, not out of guilt. The card had read, "For the next generation, make space at the table." I hadn't expected a thank you, and none came. I turned to the glass wall that overlooked the prep line. Today, the people I saw were not employees. They were chosen family. Every one of them had weathered something. Every one of them showed up. A young girl, one of the newest mentees, appeared at the door, holding a folded piece of paper in both hands. "I drew this," she said shyly. "For you." Inside was a sketch of a woman in chef whites, standing tall, holding a globe in one hand and a broom in the other. My eyes watered, but I blinked once and smiled. I taped it right next to the campaign banner. As the day wound down and the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the countertop, I walked back into the kitchen. There was one seat left empty across the prep line, a quiet spot I used to sit in during my earliest days. I stared at it for a beat, remembering the nights I thought no one would ever recognize the worth behind the work. Then I whispered, just loud enough to feel real, "Set the next table. This one's done." Sometimes, the people closest to us won't see who we are until the world forces them to look. And sometimes, even then, they still won't. But the lesson I've learned, the one I want to leave with you, is this. You don't need their permission to become who you were meant to be. You don't owe anyone a seat at your table if they never asked what it took to build it. I spent years trying to earn approval from people who never saw past my silence. What I didn't realize was that their silence was never proof of my failure. It was just proof of their fear. Fear of a different path. Fear of a woman who built without asking. And once I stopped trying to fit their version of success, I started living mine. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever been told your work doesn't count, your dreams are too small, or that you're not enough, I hope this story reminds you, you are already worthy. You don't need applause to have impact. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to draw a line between who you are and who your family wanted you to be? Or maybe you're still trying to find that line? Tell me in the comments. Let's talk about it. If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments, or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, I'd still like to hear why. Your thoughts matter. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this. Someone out there needs the reminder you just heard. Take care, keep building, keep choosing yourself.